So you see in the program, we have 2 days worth of papers. We had some that were not able to be with us because of canceled flights or visa issues or things like that. So we will be having some exceptions to the general conference rule. We didn't want people to have to drop their presentation just because of those kinds of logistics. So we will be having some people presenting via Zoom live, including our second paper in this session, which will dovetail with Mark's own presentation of the past 30 years of conceptual blending. So one more quick note how we're going to run things, just in case there's any misunderstanding. We're going to be giving speakers a full 20 minutes with 10 minutes discussion, and I'll keep time in general, with the understanding that that 10 minutes will be a hybrid after 5 minutes have passed of transition. But that's just natural. People are going to be getting up and coming in, and that way there's no misunderstanding. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to in the program is later today, after lunch, we're still going to be in this auditorium, but then after the afternoon coffee break, we're actually going to be in the Del Lago auditorium. That is in the program, but you may not have noticed it because it's shifted around. And that's upstairs in the just one floor above this in the overflow breakfast nook. And then tomorrow we'll be back here for the entire day in this auditorium. Okay, without further ado, I turn the floor over to the co-originator of conceptual blending theory, someone you all know, Professor Mark Turner, Case Western Reserve University.
Gracias, bienvenidos, gracias a todos. A veces tenemos que hablar español, pero ahora eso es suficiente. And on to English. So my original title for this was 30 years since we had a good idea. People told me maybe that had, implications that I didn't want. So what happened was Ron Glanacher used to run small dinners at his house. He'd have the dinner and then somebody would say what they were working on. So it was my turn. I was at UCSD for a year. And I presented a range of examples. They're now chestnuts of blending theory, in which I said, we are just failures. We must do better science because there is no theory of mapping that can handle these. By handle, I mean, people got construals and they got inferences. There was no doubt of that. But theories couldn't account for how they did that. And so I went on and showed these kinds of things. And at the end, after saying nothing for a while, Gilles Fauconnier said he had an example. And he did. And I approved of this example. And so we decided the next day we would write a paper. And we started it. And that began a collaboration that did not end until he passed away 4 years ago. So if Gilles were here, he would definitely say that blending is a research program to solve a problem that existed. There were lots of things we couldn't account for. That theory had swept under the wrong rug, not maliciously, but when you get something, it's easy to see in your own previous work, right? You think you've accounted for it. So this began a research program, and a research program, of course, has to have an initial theory, which we had. But much has been done, much has been done over the years. And some of it was done by Fauconnier and Turner. We've been introduced as the Lennon and McCartney of blending theory. There have been many jokes along the way. I wish you were here to share them. So, but lots and lots has been done by all stars of blending over the last 3 decades. And I will not be able to cite them all. So your names should be up here, but you're all in the room, so what the heck, right? Now, what's a blend? We usually use pyrotechnic examples. The problem with pyrotechnic examples is it seems as if blending is exotic and you will always notice it. On the contrary, 99.99999999999% of blending is not, doesn't even make it into operations because it's not useful, but it's going on, it explodes, doesn't meet optimality constraints, doesn't meet the various kinds of principles of engagement. And very few of the ones that do make it into consciousness actually get picked up. But here's one. I was at a conference and some sweet postdoc posted, apparently, if you say blending 3 times, Mark Turner appears. Now, this calls in the frame of controlling divinities and supernatural powers by their names. It's Kabbalistic, it's Hermeticism, it is in alchemy. You know it from all over the place. Beetlejuice, right? And in fact, Mephistopheles is invoked 3 times by Faust in Gounod's Faust, and then Mephistopheles appears. Says, "Me voici." And Faustus is freaked out. And so Mephistopheles jokes with it. Now, this is a great blend because in the blend, Mark Turner now has supernatural powers of attention, of recognition, and locomotion, right? Emergent structure, selective projection, right? And you can interpret this in many ways. It might be hyperbolic. So if at the conference dinner you start to talk about blending, suddenly I'm behind you with a devilish grin, right? Okay, so that's a blend. Right. So go to the blending website. You'll see hundreds of articles, scores of books, podcasts, the blah, blah, blah. I just can't keep up with it. I can't cite it. There is something I wish I hadn't done because it was a disaster. We needed to have presentations and give people some vocabulary. So I made the grave mistake of sketching this. And there were so many requests for reproduction that as soon as you could put something on Wikimedia under a Creative Commons license, I did. So it's all free. The original slide had this title: blending is a process, not a diagram, but here's some vocabulary, okay? So it's like inventing syntactic trees or something. Then all anybody wants to do is draw syntactic trees. In the history, here are just early slides from long ago. Blending is a process. Focus on the fact that it's a process. It could happen anywhere in a mental space network. So sometimes people would see a blend and they'd say, well, don't you need an extra space? It's like, yes, I need scores of other spaces in order to begin to say what's going on here in the actual interpretation. This is just so we can focus on the little thing I'm talking about now. Lots and lots of these examples that, so
professionals.
So please, if you find anybody who wants to do a blending analysis and they draw 4 circles and start to figure out what goes in which circle, please don't do that. This is just this was just for show. In the last 30 years, blending has gone everywhere as a basic mental operation, which it should. So at Cox5 2021, John Pelkey hosted an event on blending and other species. By the way, blending is just a word, it's just a label. People are nominalists. They think if they've got a noun for something, then it exists, right? And where do you draw the lines? There are lots of integrative processes. does time space collocation and ringtail lemurs count as blending? I don't care. I couldn't care less, right? I tend to focus on selective projection, emergent structure, things like that. But if you talk about what you think the process is, we'll talk. If I think it's the same process, Hakuna Matata, yeah, that's great. And then you can call it anything you want. You can call it, creme brulee if you want. Blending is a bad term in the sense that, and we knew this at the time. In a blend, it's like you blend stuff in a blender. You often can't tell what came from where. You put in eggs and oil and you get mayonnaise. Which part is the egg? But it's often the case in blending that you can tell from which input spaces things came. We tried hybrid, we tried amalgamum. Let's not reify the word blending. So we talked in 2021 about other species. Blending theory has gone through math with Nunez, Danny Arlen, De Jesus, Garcia, Ramirez, who will be here to talk about it in music, theater, art, literature. Vera Tobin is sitting right there. Religion, Switzer is sitting right here. Economics, politics, law, ERP, computational modeling, big stuff, design, business, AI, and so on. Now, there's a problem with this. I'm very glad that it's gone everywhere, but I learned very early that people want to hear their stuff. When you go talk to the lawyers about this general process, you can't use an example of the general process. You have to talk about intellectual property law. When I go to talk to the business school or design, when I linguists, discourse specialists want to hear about discourse. By the way, not everything is discourse, right? And I think what this reflects is the siloed partitioning of higher education and research. Human beings do not have a different brain when they're doing math or cooking or music, right? So I'm a little bit unhappy with the last 30 years on the balkanization of work in blending. Yeah, I love to talk about syntax and morphology and phonology and so on, but the reason you can have robust advanced language, the reason it can exist is because you have the capacity for blending, right? Now, I'll just mention a few things about what I think are great new avenues in blending. One is multimodality. Now, blending has been multimodal from the beginning. We did political cartoons. We did one of the earliest blends. Gilles talked about when he had ski instructions. The ski instructor said, well, you're French. Remember, pretend you're a French waiter and you've got to balance that tray. Your hand should be like this, right? Embodied, multimodal. And he said, okay, so I knew how to carry a tray, and that really helped. So I was just in Nijmegen at the Gesture Conference, and we reanalyzed this classic chestnut that Mike Tomasello uses. He talks about the fact that he was in an airport. There's a 5-year-old child. The airport security guard scanned the front of the child and wanted the child to turn around so he could scan the back, and went to the child like this. And the kid went, right? Mike said, it didn't have the common ground, so it couldn't get the analogy, but it's anything but a simple analogy. If there's, at the intentional level, the child in the blend has to know that the intentionality for the action actually comes from the guard. Indeed, the child needs a conception of the guard's mind such that the guard has a conception of the child's mind, such that guard and child will understand that they are in a scene of joint attention and classic joint attention, and that the guard is trying to communicate to the child. Indeed, you have to pull in the frame and blend in command and then obedience. So the child is performing in the blend an action, the purpose of which the child need not even understand. It's just under obedience. Immense blending at the intentional level. But now just look at the finger. Okay, the child is not supposed to do this like a finger, recurrent and always in the same direction. That's what the finger is doing, right? No, the child is supposed to do this, right? So incredible blending, right? But there's more, because it could be that the child is not the counterpart of the finger. You know, when you like, you don't, you're all too young. When you dial a phone, or you make a little plate move around by doing this, so you can blend in the caused motion frame, in which case the finger is causing something to move. The thing that must move is not apparent. So now you have a blend in which there's an imagined component that is being caused to move, and the child can be the counterpart of that object. But again, the child is supposed to change orientation and not do it repeatedly, right? Okay, incredible blending, just amazing blending. So gesture.
How long to put the
There
whole
are all
thing
kinds of
together
great
from inception
gestures.
to completion?
So Larry King says, how long did it take you to do it all from inception to completion? An incredible blend of operation, direction, progress along a linear scale, source path whole, and then a discourse management gesture, inviting her to take over. I'm very interested in gestures for blended classic joint attention. So classic joint attention is, hey, Billy, look at that blackbird in the bush. It's got red stripes on its wings. Right? Blended classic joint attention is when you use classic joint attention as an input, but there's a lot else going on, like in a letter or a phone call or a news broadcast or something, or like this.
If you have any questions about getting the data from your old hard drive to your new hard drive, we made a video for you that covers the process, and we will link to it right there.
See, you know that she is not pointing at a thing, which is the normal thing with the blackbird. No, you know, wherever she points, they're going to put the thing in post-production, and it could say here, or click me, or this is it, or anything else. And that when you click it, it will take you to a website, right? So very interesting in these kinds of things for blended classic joint attention. You can go read all about it. Neuroscience, of course, Shauna Poulsen, ERP. There's been a lot of work since then. One of my favorite neuroscience blending, neuro substrate for blending is the little love peanut. When peanuts fall in love, I'll recommend that article. Chago Torrent and I are writing a book called Future Mind, which is about the fact that human beings can think about futures that of which they have no memory, that don't exist, can't exist at the moment. They're completely counterfactual, and you can do this across causation, agency, time, and space. CATS, right? Causation, agency, time, and space, right? How do you do that? Blending is the main thing that you're using in order to conceive of the future. It's a major open scientific problem that we have here and now embodied bodies, and we're right here, and everything I have to think of with is right here. It may seem as if memory brings in the past, but it doesn't. Memory is not a window through which the past flies. On the contrary, everything you're doing to remember is right here, right now, in your body, in the room. That's it. How can you think of these futures? So we're writing a book about that. It's almost done. A Blender AI. Large language models can't think, and they certainly don't understand English. However, they can mimic, at least for someone who is cooperative. They seem to mimic output, otherwise this, but the output is restricted to what it's trained on. Blending is a highly creative process. Can we take the 30 years of blending principles and bring them to AI to consider what kind of new frontiers we might have in AI? So later on, I think it's tomorrow, you'll hear about Frame Blender put together by Wenyue Zi and Zhongyang Chang. I'm very fond of this recent paper a few days ago blending concepts with text-to-image diffusion models. These people took the way we think and said, well, look, diffusion models are good on visual stuff, but the visual stuff, like the Buddhist monk, is often about a conceptual blend. Can you take visual things that represent, or at least are prompt for, different kinds of frames and have a diffusion architecture, not an auto-regression, but a diffusion architecture that will do visual blending. And I don't mean a cat riding a motorcycle, although that's pretty good, but a visual rendering that prompts for a conceptual blend. So AI is big on these things. Now, grammar, knowing a communicative system, is knowing a relational network of form, meaning, pairs, and how they blend into a performance, such that the person seeing the performance asks, essentially, what form, meaning, pairs do I know which, if blended, would have produced this performance, this form? And that gives you the mental space network for attributing meaning to this performance that you saw. This is the claim in chapter 7 of the 1996 book, The Literary Mind. And I'm very happy to say that 30 years later, the awesome Thomas Hoffman, who will be speaking next, is going to present this particular thesis. The book is called Creative Construction Grammar. It's coming from Cambridge Press. It's going to be gold access, so you can all get it. And we are just waiting for feedback from this conference before we submit the final manuscript. Thomas will tell you all about that. So what am I looking for in the future? Remember, this is a research program, and only some of it has been pushed forward. Even that is under revision. I'm looking for a unified science of advanced human cognition, just advanced cognition, that would combine cognitive science, artificial intelligence, neuroscience with blending theory as a major platform for this unified science. If you want to talk to me about that, just go to my website. You know how to, my email is on there and you can talk to me, right? Or actually, it occurs to me that you know how to get me. You just say, thank you very much.